Welcome to another episode of Visibility Era, the podcast. Today we have an amazing friend and guest. She was connected to me through another incredible publicist. Her name is Nic Bryan. She is the founder of Lunch Co. And we were discussing what we wanted to talk about today. And she brought a really juicy topic up that I feel like needs to be discussed, but never really is in the PR media space. And also it's a conversation that happens a lot with brands when they come to publicists. It's like, I really want to talk about this, but I know it's sensitive. So there's a little hint. But Nic, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to discuss this topic with y'all. Yeah, I think this conversation is especially timely with everything that's going on in the current news cycle. So excited to dive into it.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, I think the most recent one, other than like politics, was the California fires. So, just to give everybody some context, we were discussing how to pitch angles that are around a sensitive topic, like a natural disaster, maybe politics, maybe political or I don't know, like social climates and things like that, where there's amazing brands with good hearts and minds that want to share something, but a lot of people have a lot of opinions, I guess, or emotions attached to it. So how do we pitch something and be really mindful about what we're pitching? So I think this will be really good. But let's start at the beginning, Nic, because I've been dying to know why your agency is called Lunch and Co.
Um,
Dying to know. I love the name.
well, a friend and I, we started it together we would go out to lunch and we would have all these candid conversations. And so that's really where the name came from. It's not something, more creative or clever than that, but we just felt like people were having candid conversations over a meal. And so it just felt like a natural fit for us. We've done a lot of work with brands that are in the food and beverage space. So yeah, who doesn't like lunch?
That's such a cute idea. I love that. It's funny with names of brands because it's just like either they have some fun story or I have a client actually, it's called they talked about their business on this specific street and so they named their entire business like the street name, which I thought was really cute. So anyway, I
That
love
is
stories.
cute.
Yeah, I love stories like that. Nic, can you tell us a little bit about your background in PR and in media? You clearly have an accent, but you live in the United States and you serve mostly US clients, I believe.
Yeah, that's correct. I also work with a lot of Australian and UK clients that are trying to come into the US market. But yes, most of my work is out here. Um, I guess to take it back, like I've always loved storytelling. When I was a kid, I always had my nose in a book or a magazine. RIP magazines.
I know.
You're
We love
right. Yeah.
you and
I know. I'm hoping there'll be some kind of comeback. There's always like stirrings around that. But
yeah.
originally, I went to university to become a journalist. And while I was there, I was taking some business classes and then realized I really enjoy that too. And so doing PR kind of just seemed to kind of beautifully merge those two interests. And once I graduated, I was in Australia working in PR for about a year. And then I got this amazing opportunity to come out to the States and do PR in Los Angeles and work with lifestyle and entertainment brands, working on really cool projects like the Grammys. I think I did their backstage gifting lounge in the media around that for like 7 years or something. And that was super cool as a little Aussie foreigner. But what I noticed was, the projects that I worked on that really lit me up were the ones that were tied to a bigger mission. And so during COVID, that's when I kind of went out on my own and started Lunch and Co. And we're a boutique PR agency that really helps brands tell stories that matter and that are important. So it's brands that are tied to, social or sustainability causes.
I love that. I love social and sustainability. I think I shared this with you. I'm not sure. But before I started my agency, I basically quit my job during during COVID while everybody was holding on to theirs. I was like, I'm gonna be an entrepreneur, but I'm not really sure.
Ballsy.
Here, I know. I was like, here are my skills, whatever. And so I did not get any financial assistance because I quit. It was my decision. So I was like, let me just figure this shit out. But I really wanted to work at a company, if I was going to work at a company, I was like toying back and forth between entrepreneurship and not. And I was looking at brands that had really beautiful missions, like Patagonia, like, whatever, sustainable brands that had some sort of aspect, which was like a give back or something like that. So I love that you also share that interest. I think it's really nice to work with brands that are just like doing good work in the world. I always joke around like my clients are big vision brands. So whether they're, doing something as simple as I solved a problem with a product or
Yeah.
something as big as like I want to, infiltrate this space and like make a change in a positive way. I just think, a lot of brands that we work with have just really good hearts, which is really cool.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's really beautiful. And, it's also important to say, like, the brand doesn't have to be, an organization that's necessarily,
Right.
selling a product or doing something really progressive. But when they have some kind of give back model built
Yeah.
into their business, I think that goes a long way, in building consumer trust as well. So I'm seeing more and more brands do that, which is really cool. And I think it's just an issue now of like greenwashing, right? Like sometimes it's difficult
Yes.
to tell who's doing the work and who's not. But I like that we're kind of moving into this space of thinking about others and, thinking about our brand as part of a bigger community and what we're giving back.
100%. Funny about this is not really greenwashing, but it's just the classic like shiny label situation. So last night, my fiance and I were late night shopping at Whole Foods in Delray.
Love it.
And we were just like grabbing things we needed the next morning. We're like, we should go now because I know we're going to regret this tomorrow if we don't. So eggs, things that we like to eat for breakfast. But I saw that there was this like collagen brand that had a big sale, and I was like, oh, I kind of want to buy collagen. I haven't had it in a while. And I'm like, yeah, Spence, it's wild caught, non-GMO, just like reading off the label. And he's like, Lydia, obviously it's non-GMO if it's wild caught. I'm like, yeah, but like they put it on there. So you like see the shiny labels. So
Yeah.
anyway, it wasn't really greenwashing because it's true, but it's just like there are a lot of definitely like, the natural aisle in the grocery store. It's like, what does that actually mean? Or like whatever.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. It's interesting because consumers have so many options now. And so for them to find something that truly aligns with their values can be difficult. And I
Yeah.
think that's actually why brands kind of need to do PR pushes around this, right? Because
Yeah.
they are the trusted voices. So if I read a recommendation by an outlet like Goop, who I know has really high vetting standards, I can trust that, whatever is in it is going to be good for me. So I think that's when like media can actually be really helpful at helping brands tell those stories and
Yeah.
giving them that credibility beyond just like the packaging.
Yeah, I agree. So when a brand comes to you with a mission, a story, or something like that, how would you discuss, you kind of hinted at it, but like, or how would you share with them why it's important to be, I guess, like the driver of the narrative, for the media and like building that brand presence?
Yeah, totally. Well, I think it's sometimes when you have a product that's maybe in a sensitive vertical or a sensitive space, it can be difficult to know how to navigate that. And there's risks with sharing and risks with being silent as well, right? So
Yeah.
I think the first thing that brands need to do is really listen and see what's going on in their space. What are the conversations that are being held? What are other brands saying? And I always remind brands like this, the goal isn't to jump into every conversation, but to know where you fit and just to show up with intention. And sometimes it's truly better to stay silent, like this isn't your moment. So, kind of looking at the media landscape in general, looking at what's going on, and then deciding from there, kind of what action to take.
That's such a good point. When to stay silent, it's not your moment, and when to not. I think a lot of brands out there, maybe without PR support, feel like they need to speak like during
Mm-hmm.
certain like events and things that happen. And they're like, oh, okay, well, I have a platform, so I need to share my opinion when sometimes it doesn't make sense. So speaking of this, like, how would you navigate a conversation, I guess, with a client who asks you, like, hey, okay, here's actually, I'm trying to think of an example. Somebody came to me once and said that they like got shamed because they were talking about something. It might have been around what's going on in Israel.
Okay.
Yeah, which is like another one like the hurricane or Israel. It's like, how do you share your opinion without, upsetting somebody else? And so I think it was just like very one-sided, where the other side felt like they weren't seen. So how would you navigate that conversation with the client if they do want to maybe share something that's important to them as like polarizing as what's going on in Israel and Palestine right now? Yeah, like what would you do? I don't even know what I would do. I haven't had this. I've had brands like talk to me about it, but I haven't had that as a client.
Yeah, well, I think one, as publicists, we need to be really careful about the kind of clients that we take on because ultimately we're
Totally.
putting our name and our relationships on the line as well too. So if it feels really uncomfortable, I wouldn't attach my name to that because, we've done all this work. Like you've been in the space a long time. I've been in the space 12 years. Like I'm not going to risk tarnishing my reputation with something that doesn't feel right. But I think
Yeah.
just figuring out what is motivating the client, asking them, what is your role right now? How can you genuinely help or offer value? Are you even a valuable voice in this conversation?
Yeah.
Are you bringing an expert opinion? Is there something, um, notable that you can contribute here, or are you just looking for notoriety? Because I think if they're looking for an outlet to vent, there's other ways that they can do that, and pitching isn't going to be the right way to do it because you want to protect those relationships. And then if you do feel that you have a seat at the table, there's a conversation that you want to have. I think the second part is really thinking about, messaging. Like, what do you want to say and who do you want to say it to, and getting super clear on that.
Yeah, that's such a great point. It's what is the outcome? Why do you feel this way? I think sometimes some people just want to vent, and that's okay. Like you're allowed to vent, but also attaching it to a brand, if it's not like the main topic or main point, we would always want to think about the aftermath of that, of like, okay, if you do share this, let's just think about what happens afterwards in terms of like your positioning. Because at the end of the day, when we're talking about brands and PR, and visibility, you are all day long positioning yourself. I think about it as almost like building a community around you. So PR, a lot of the times, in my opinion, is like, yes, you're getting your brand out there and it's brand awareness and it's all of these things, but you're naturally creating a community of people that are raving fans, and or maybe whatever community that may be. And so thinking about how to nurture that community and that audience, before you get them and then while you actually do have them.
Yeah, I love that. And I think definitely leading with community centric messaging that puts
Yeah.
people at the heart of it and not the product is the way to go when you're pitching, whether it's like a natural disaster or whether, you're pitching something that's sensitive. And I think on my end, the biggest, I guess, influx of like, what should we do that I'm getting from clients right now is
Yeah.
around tariffs. Like, I know we've had
Oh,
natural
yeah.
disasters, we've had a
Yeah.
lot, but I think tariffs are top of mind for brands as well. And how do we communicate that? And I think what I always tell brands is like, yeah, there's a risk to staying silent and there's a risk to speaking. And it's like,
Yeah.
how do you walk down that road? How risk adverse are you? Because there are brands who will take, um, you know, these conditions and they'll turn it into really great PR. Like if you look at Dame, which is an intimate wellness company, they've just blown up in the last couple of days. I mean, they've always been a well-known brand, but they've got a ton of placements in business outlets speaking about this tariff charge that they've put in their checkout, and they've done it in a very cute and cheeky way that really speaks to their liberal audience. And then they've gone out and spoken about it. And what they've done is they've put themselves on the same team as their customers and their audience. Like, we hate rising prices. Like, we know you hate it too. Like, we're both in this same battle together. And I think that's really good at building connection and emotional bonds and all of those things. So
Yeah.
it's really impressive when brands do that. Obviously, they're very, um, they're not sensitive to risk, versus other brands are like, hey, we're going to take a step back, see what other brands do, and then tread softly here. And I think it's just about figuring out how comfortable you are and also knowing your audience, knowing whether your audience is expecting you to speak up or whether, you know, they're not.
Yeah, I love that. Gosh. And if you want to speak up on specific topics, I think it's very important to be authentic and also meet your audience on the level that they're at. Like I love that, this brand Dame, they came out on the checkup page with like, "Oh, we hate it too." Like just being relatable because yeah, it's like that authenticity piece instead of like they could have chose to add this tariff in without saying anything. And they were like, okay, well, I know my audience and we like to be very community centric and authentic and like,
Mhm.
communicate with them in high communication. And so that was like perfect for their brand. I love that. I need to look at the
Yeah.
checkout page.
Yeah, it's funny, it's cheeky. And if you Google them, you'll see all the press that they got too. And I
Yeah,
think if we think about, Gen Z and perhaps even millennial audiences, there's really been this push over the last few years for more transparency, more
100%.
honesty. Like the content that does well is not polished. It's raw and it's real. And I think if you're a brand now and you have a product, as a founder, you can't really hide behind that product anymore. Like you also have to kind of be a thought leader in your own right,
100%.
right? And
It's
that's going to get you
wild.
more
Like,
press.
yep,
Yeah.
yep. I have had conversations with clients because, like, I do a lot of founder press, like a ton of founder. An expert. I was in the music space before I was in the product play space, and so I understood how to like kind of position a person and a personal brand. And so I kind of like fell into that when I started my own agency, and now I have a mix of the two. But what I've found over the years is like people want to see who's behind the brand.
Mhm.
Um, and I think there's different ways to do it. So, Nick, speaking of like what is popular right now, you were talking about raw and authentic, or like just kind of like not messy, but like it's okay to be a little messy kind of thing. What would you say for a brand that maybe is luxury or high end that comes to you and wants to kind of touch into that or tap into that market, but wants to make sure that they can still uphold their own standards? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it really comes down to your audience's comfort level. So whether
Yeah.
it's like maybe you're planning something on your socials that you want to discuss. So thinking what's an entry point for them. And I keep coming back to sexual wellness just because it's a space that I'm in all the time.
Yeah.
But maybe you want to approach it from more of a holistic angle. Maybe you want to bring on other experts like doctors or other people in the space that can speak on it with authority and credibility to help get your message across the line. I don't think that being luxury and being real need to be, mutually exclusive. So I think that
Yeah.
there's definitely overlap there. And I think there's really good examples of brands that are doing that, well. It's just a matter of knowing your audience, vetting your messaging. And what's nice is when you have a platform like socials or newsletters, you can kind of test that out a little bit, add a line in there, add something that's fun, add something that's cheeky, see if it resonates. You don't need to commit to changing all of your messaging, but I think there's ways to dip your toes in the water and see what kind of response you get. And I think going back to positioning, you're going to be different things to different people. So the way that you would pitch, a luxury product to Forbes is going to be very different to the way that you might pitch it to another media outlet. So just using that lens on the different things that you do and not trying to be everything to everyone because that's what gets you in trouble. That's when you're not going to have that brand loyalty. Like, you want to have that emotional connection. So I would say just start by understanding your audience and perhaps if you are a luxury brand, like this isn't the right strategy for you, but having those conversations and doing some listening is going to serve you.
Yeah. I love that you keep mentioning comfort level because I think that that is really important. And I work with a lot of newer brands, and I'm saying newer as in like 5 years, which is pretty new.
Yeah.
And so I'll have founders that come to me and they say, "Oh, I really want founder press." And I'm like, "Okay, like what do you feel comfortable sharing?" And I've had a few of them come to me and say that they don't feel comfortable sharing their personal life or anything like
Mm-hmm.
that. And I'm like, I totally get it. Why don't we just focus on like your expertise? We'll talk about work and like what you want to speak on there. We could talk about entrepreneurship. We can talk about your specific expertise. This person in particular was in tech and AI. And so I was like, we should just talk about that. But what's
Yeah.
funny is And what I think is beautiful with brands is your brand is always evolving with you over time. And so we did that for a little while. And then she got excited about like talking on different podcasts. And she was like, you know what? I think I'm going to talk about like being a mom and an entrepreneur. I'm like, all right, let's do it. And so, yeah, I love the comfort level conversation because I think your comfort level is going to change over time too, whether it be this way or that way.
Yeah, it's so funny. I've definitely had clients the same thing where they're like, oh, I don't want my personal life all out
Yeah.
there. But then they start doing interviews, they see how fun it can be. And I think it can be really empowering to share your story, especially, if you're a mom that's an entrepreneur, like speaking about that, inspires other people. So I think if you're comfortable with that, for sure, lean into it. Why not?
Yeah, exactly. And when it comes to like sharing your story, I I agree with you. I think it comes back to like authenticity. I just like it
Hmm.
always comes back to that for me. I'm like authenticity, like that's what hits. I am such a consumer that wants to know who's behind the brand. So I
Yeah.
love podcast. I don't know if you're a podcast junkie. I'm like it's a lot. I'm like, welcome to my podcast. But I will buy things off of shows because I listen to their story and I'm like, oh, I'm all in. And so I think that even shows like the power of PR or just sharing stories in general and stories at the end of the day, whether it be just about the product or whether it be founder facing, both can be powerful. But stories are what helps dictate, I think, consumer culture at the end of the day. Cause it's like, I just ads don't work like they used to. Remember when we were kids and it was like you would see magazines with just a bunch of pictures of products and it's not that way anymore. It's evolved over time. So Nick, what have you seen evolve since like your magazine days?
Gosh, I mean, I think media is just changing all the time, and so it
Yeah.
can be challenging to keep up with it. I think in terms of a few different things that I've seen change, but I think in terms of brands and their positioning, it's been really interesting. So I feel like, 12 years ago when I started, it was a lot more uncommon for brands to be outspoken about maybe their political positioning,
Yeah.
maybe, what they do for their employees, like anything beyond, like you said, the product being front and center, unless they were like this huge visionary CEO.
Right.
Um, and then, over the last few years, we've seen more and more of a softening into that, consumers wanting more of that. And I think a lot of people now have the mindset of, they vote with their dollar, right? So they shop for things that feel aligned with their value, just like how you were saying. I'll be a lifetime customer of Dr. Bronner's because of the articles and the media that I've seen about their leadership team and how much they take care of their staff and the integrity that they have. Doesn't matter the price. So like I feel like that's amazing. When you're a brand, like you can't buy that kind of loyalty. It's just showing up with integrity and kind of getting your stories out there. I do think though in the current climate, we are seeing that pulled back a little bit with brands going down more of like a neutral pathway. And again, it just comes down to knowing your audience and understanding what they expect from you. I think in terms of media though, media is a lot more receptive to having some of those tougher, I guess, conversations as like TV segments or as articles than they were previously. And I honestly think that's smart for them too, because if you think about the things that, if you think about a problem you have, maybe you're going to ask a friend for a solution. But if it's something a little awkward or embarrassing or a little bit sensitive, you're probably going to turn to the internet, right?
Yeah.
So I think when editors kind of prioritize those kind of topics, it can be a win for them as well. I always suggest when people are pitching something that they think might be a little bit on the nose, that they just have an intro line that they start with of like, hey, this pitch might be a little bit sensitive. It's on the topic of sexual assault. But we want to be aware of any sensitivities here. If you want to opt out or delete this email, please do so. And obviously they already know that they have permission to delete the email, but I think just giving a voice to it is really nice for people in terms of like being seen in whatever way.
That is such a good tip. Everyone take notes. I love that tip. I am thinking back actually to one of my very first years of PR. I think I was like year three into PR, and I had a client I've noticed actually recently because they're sold in Target. I saw their packaging and I was like, huh, it has changed. But this was also like 2018, maybe. They had a product that was like wipes for him, wipes for her. And
Mhm.
I just didn't know like the sensitivity around that. I just figured like, all right, like you know what parts you have or whatever, and you can just buy your wipes and that's it. And so I would just pitch it out to men's interest for him, women's interest for her. Also, just not putting the pieces together. I think honestly, PR has made me a better person in that I've realized how many topics can be sensitive or how
Mhm.
many opinions are out there and how many different experiences people have. And so it's just made me more aware, I think, in terms of awareness. But I remember I pitched out the product and I got a response from a writer, excuse me, who is trans. And she was like, she told me, this is really inappropriate that the brand has for him, for her. There are others out there that maybe would not, be okay with this language. And, I would love to discuss it with you if they even have some questions. And I think that conversation alone, of course, I like, voice that to the brand and their concerns that there was somebody who was offended by this. And at the end of the day, you can't please everybody. So it just comes down to also like your own values, your own beliefs, and all of those things. There's lots of different pieces that come into any sensitive topic. But I did find that interesting and opened my awareness to how to pitch the brand appropriately and properly and who to pitch it to as well. Have you ever come up with like anything like that?
I feel like it well, what a gift that that editor got back to you and gave you that insight because,
Yeah.
like you said, we just don't know what we don't know. Um, I mean, back in the day, I remember one time I pitched Mother's Day and I had someone write back to me being like, "This is really tough for me to read. You know, my mom passed away, and so you're right. You just don't know what's going on in someone's life, and yeah, you can't please everyone, but everything is kind of a learning experience there."
Yeah.
I think what's really helpful on my end is when I'm pitching something sensitive or that I think might be the tiniest bit sensitive, is
Yeah.
just doing like a sensitivity check. So having someone else read the pitch, hopefully someone that's had kind of that lived experience if I'm pitching something that's not relevant to me. Like I work with a client right now and they're doing some amazing work with the American Cancer Society to close racial health gaps, right? So as a white woman, sometimes it's a little bit difficult for me to be in those conversations and make sure I'm advocating in the right way. So being able to check the tone, check the pitch, and check the messaging by someone else is a really great way to get around that. And I think a really good practice anyway, right? Because
Yeah.
sometimes we're so close to our brands that we can't see the forest through the trees. And, stuff that seems really intuitive to us as someone opening a pitch or reading about the product for the first time might be like, huh? Like, where there's a knowledge gap there. So I think it's a
Yeah.
good practice to just get that second opinion when you're pitching something that's sensitive like that. But yes, having worked, with some pretty spicy brands and in, some sensitive
Spicy.
spaces, I've definitely had a few pitches back that people, a few responses back that people weren't loving what I was putting out there. And I think if you lead with that respect, then there's opportunities for growth and there's potentials to keep that relationship. Whereas if you just pitch something really hard and fast and heavy, it's not going to leave a good impression.
Yeah. Respect. That's such a good point and topic to speak on because say we pitch something, or maybe even a brand says something, and you accidentally offend a group of people, or maybe you just like didn't realize that you weren't being sensitive. I think coming back with respect is always the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you agree or not, it's people are people at the end of the day. Everybody deserves respect, and so I love that you said that because I have had questions where I've had clients, or potential clients, or people ask me questions. People ask me questions all the time about PR where they're like, I want to talk about this, but like, I don't want to offend anyone, or I'm scared, or I don't think that blah, 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 whatever their question is. And my response is always like, listen, be mindful of others. Other people have lived experiences, maybe have some friends like read it over. So I love that you said, I might have somebody else read it over and ask if this is consumable to different audiences. But at the end of the day, you can't please everybody. And I think coming back with respect is really important. So if you want to speaking of even coming back to like the Israel and Palestine, which I think is like probably one of the most sensitive topics that's
Hmm.
happened in the past year, um, is if you want to speak on it, be respectful of others. And I, I mean, there's a way to go about almost everything, right?
Yeah, there is, but I think it's just also important to remember like you don't need to be part of
And also
every
that too.
conversation, you know? Like I know it's tough because, sometimes like we use news tracking as a great tool all the time. Like I'm sure you use it with your clients as well. But I
Yeah.
think when it's a sensitive topic or when there's a natural disaster going on or something, external happening, you want to be super careful about how you use it and think, am I really bringing value to the conversation? Is me speaking about it going to
Yeah.
help someone, or am I just looking to position myself as a thought leader here? And maybe that isn't the right time to do that kind of work. Maybe there's a different
Totally.
angle that you lean into.
Totally. And then there's also brands, not brands that I personally work with, but there are brands out there that literally blew up because they're shit talkers and like that's their thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, which
yeah.
I'm trying to think of any brand. Do you like have any off the top of your head?
I mean, I feel like off the top of my head, my pillow, right? That guy went absolutely crazy.
What
Um,
brand?
Pillow, do you know it?
Do I not know what happened? Come on,
Oh,
Lydia.
just he's a very outspoken Republican,
The
and
My
he
Pillow
did a lot.
guy?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's what the brand's
I
called.
forgot about My
Um,
Pillow.
but yeah, he has a Republican audience. He does
Okay.
well with them. He's outspoken about it. So again, it comes down to knowing your audience and whether your audience are going to
Yep.
appreciate controversy.
Right.
So, or whether they're going to feel like, oh, this is icky and uncomfortable, and I'm not sure if I want to be putting my dollars there,
Totally.
And when you're pitching, it's like, maybe like I think there's this fine line between a story being really good and juicy and maybe being a bit too much. So I think with editors, you've got to lead with, fact-based language and just make sure that you have all the data and the full picture there. Because you can also get into a bunch of legal trouble if you're sharing the wrong information with a journalist and they print it and they've done all this work to build their audience. And so, they want to protect that. So I think just being very fact-driven rather than opinion-driven is the way to go. And perhaps like
Always.
it could be interesting to think about how different mediums are maybe right for different things. Like
Yep.
podcasts tend to be more opinion, chatting, conversational versus like how you might go about pitching that or sharing it to other angles. So maybe that's a better avenue to steer those founders down that want to do, more opinion based sharing.
Yeah. So oh my gosh, I have so many questions for you. Okay, so if you were to reverse engineer and think about specific categories that are worth, maybe having a second thought before posting something or asking or having your publicist reach out or whatever it may be, what would those categories, I mean, a good publicist, no matter what, will probably come back to you with some questions, but what
Mm-hmm.
categories would that be? I'm thinking like number one would probably be like politics, um, gender, like are there any other
Yeah.
categories you've seen?
I think it's just something where you feel like it might be emotionally reactive to the other person. So
Yeah.
thinking about what are things that impact people's lives? What do people have strong opinions on? So yes,
Yeah.
politics and gender and the way that people show up in the world is definitely big ones. I don't have a hard and fast list, but I just think about, okay, what
Yeah.
conversation would people be potentially reactive to? Okay, that's where you need to tread lightly.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. It's funny. I used to annoy my fiance all the time for years. I would ask him to read over pitches and because he has such like a different opinion. He's just like a normal guy going about his day. Also, I have a lot of like spiritual clients too. So I'm always pitching topics that might not be topics that people know about, like at
Mm-hmm.
all, unless you're interested in that category. And so I'll ask him like read over pitches and see if he gets it. Like if I tell my
Yeah.
brother, hey, do you know what breath work is? He'll be like, I don't know, breathing. Like he just would have no idea. So I think with sensitive topics too, there are tools that we can use now. Like I have been using ChatGPT a lot to like send in like pitches and ask questions, whereas I used to like bother him about it. So
Yeah.
I think that even somebody listening that doesn't have a PR team and is a brand and wants to even like post things on social and wants to and is having second thoughts or thinking, ooh, maybe this might create a little bit of controversy, it's great to even chat with your chatbot and just see like
Yeah.
what it comes up with. Do you have any other tools that you use? That's just like me and what I'm using.
Gosh, I do use ChatGPT occasionally, but I do think when it's a super sensitive topic, sometimes ChatGPT lacks like the nuance. I mean, not what you're talking about,
Yeah.
spirituality. That could actually be really great to get a robot to read on that, right? Because that's very far into them. So, but I think
Yeah.
sometimes with like more sensitive topics, it lacks like the empathy or the nuance that maybe they need. Although I will
100%.
say I have used ChatGPT to solve a personal problem, and it actually gave me great advice because it took the reactiveness out
Yeah.
of it on my end. So I think sometimes the fact that it's not an emotional being can be helpful. um I don't really like, I would say just do the social listening. So ask your social team or go to your socials, put in hashtags and see what's being
Yeah.
spoken about in the space that, or, in the industry that you want to speak on. Um, Again, getting that second opinion when you write, putting that blurb up the top that's kind of like a disclaimer of what's to come, I think is really helpful. Um, but I don't have any tech or tools that I necessarily use. I try to lead like with a very human first approach here. And
Yeah.
that's honestly one of my favorite things about working for myself and not working for big corporations anymore is that I get to write emails
Yeah.
that feel very genuine and very me and not jargon, not corporate speak. And, sometimes they're a little bit silly and sometimes they're a little bit fun. And even if we're talking about something that's serious, it doesn't mean that we can't have fun with it or use some self expression or maybe use some humor where appropriate to kind of create some levity and create that bond in the situation. Obviously, you have to tread carefully there. But I think, I really enjoy that part of working for myself is just having that full expression and feeling like I'm relating on a personal level and not hiding behind technical speak.
Oh my gosh, I could speak, I think, like for hours about that. I love that as well. I had an agency I worked for a while where one of our clients literally quit because they said that we sounded like robots. They
Oh my
had,
gosh.
isn't that crazy? I remember I sent a smiley face to a client. I immediately got a call from management. They were like it was a lot of micromanaging. They're like, we don't do that. I was like,
Oh,
what?
I'm emojis all day long.
I mean, I'm emojis all day long too, but I mean a smiley face just to show you some delight. Like, I don't know, it was
Yeah.
very interesting. So I agree. I think that having your own, agency, you can also set the precedent for the tone. And I think you coming from an authentic space and speaking the way that you do, and also like having that emotional awareness for sensitive topics, like it's honestly brave. Like, I love that you messaged me last week when I asked you to be on the podcast and you were like, "Oh, I actually really would love to talk about like sensitive topics and how to navigate that." I think a lot of people shy away from it. So, what do you personally like about it? I feel like it's like such a cool challenge to take on.
Oh, thank you. I think I've always been a conflict avoidant person. So
Mm,
always avoided dealing with, issues or having those tough conversations. And then over the past few years, I've been forced to with, things that maybe have gone on personally. And I think just with the changing climate that we're in, felt more compelled to speak out about these kind of things. And so it feels like a really nice way to use my voice and have some agency and like live in alignment with those values. But I'm definitely still very much a work in progress at addressing some of those like conflicts or those awkward topics head on. But because we've just got clients naturally from those different areas, we've had to get very good at speaking on different taboo topics and learning how to do that with like humility and sensitivity and empathy and all of the things.
yeah. Gosh, I love that. So I know that you mentioned in your intake form, which I love. I love when people fill out intake forms, even friends, because I'm like, oh, like this is interesting. I didn't know this about them, or I would have never known unless I asked. So you had mentioned you spoke on Hurricane Helene. Um, can you tell us a story? I don't know if you're allowed to speak on it, or if you want to speak on it, but tell us a story of how you navigated that and how you pitched that.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I'd love to. So I was working, or I still am working with
Yeah.
this coffee chain that's in the Carolinas, and they were planning a store opening right around the time that this happened. The store wasn't anywhere near Asheville, but we kind of had a talk internally. We always do a big pitch, a press release, a lot of different influencer marketing around the store openings traditionally. So we felt, this really isn't the time to focus on that. We need to pivot. So we utilized, I think, the 8 or 9 other locations that they had across the 2 states to hold a proceeds day and raise funds for the community in Asheville where they had one of their locations. And I think what's really important here is we didn't make them the hero of the story. We focused on keeping it very community centric. It was about directing people to the store where we were having, we were donating 100% of our revenue towards important causes there. So I think that was a really helpful way to build that trust and that integrity and give value back. And it also, did well for us because we got some great press out of it. And because our goal was to get as many people to the stores to buy coffees those days, we hit up different sister news stations that were in the areas that weren't affected. And they ran our story saying, hey, shop at Clutch tomorrow, grab your coffee there because every dollar you spend is going directly to this group that has boots on the ground. So I think don't be afraid to pivot. Like sometimes those plans have to go on pause. And I think brands that, handle adversity well can have really big PR moments out of it as long as they put people first and not the product first, because you can also get really bad press out of doing that too. So again, you want
Yeah.
to tread very carefully. And I think, people will remember how you made them feel when times were heavy or uncertain, whether it's good or bad. There's a brand that does this so well, and it's Chewy. I don't know if you're familiar
Yeah.
with it. Yeah, everyone knows Chewy.
So popular. Chewy,
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure they have a headquarters down here. Am I crazy? Don't they have it down here?
no, I think I've driven past it on a road trip and
Somebody
been
told
like,
me they
okay.
wanted, yeah, somebody told me they wanted to work at Chewy down here. And I was like, oh, like I'm pretty sure anyways, if you're in Miami, I'm gonna Google this afterwards. I feel like they might be in Miami or something, but yes, Chewy.
Yeah. They, when someone, I think I've had a few different stories of like someone's had a pet that passed away and they've got Chewy have sent them a bunch of flowers, or, I've even ordered like the wrong dog food for my dog before. And I wrote to them saying, it's unopened. Can I send it back? And they said, donate it to your local shelter and we'll just send you the right one, without whatever the price difference was. So I think that brands that put their community first do really well. Like everyone knows Chewy.
Yeah.
I feel like the general sentiment is that they're a great brand that puts people and pets first. I've heard journalists talk about them like in unsponsored ways just because they just really put that positioning out into the world and act with heart and integrity. And yeah, not every brand is going to have the budget to do that, right? Like those gestures do require a lot of budget, but I think thinking about what you can do in ways that you can give back to your community is always going to be beneficial for you when you want to build that emotional resonance with your community.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that there's ways to do everything. Like I just checking in with your branding expert, your PR expert, and asking about positioning, I think is so important because
Mm-hmm.
like you said, like if you were to have even if like the brand had integrity and heart in mind for Hurricane Helene, your coffee brand, it could also be positioned in a different way. Like you knew exactly how to position it in your pitch in the way that reflected the way that the brand actually wanted to be represented or actually wanted to be spoken about, which is like, hey, we just want to talk about the community and helping them.
Yeah.
And so having the right representation, I think, is so important when it comes to especially sensitive topics. I would recommend reaching out to Nic or somebody else who is an expert in this space. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I echo that completely. And again, it's like when you're in it, sometimes it's really hard to get a sense of, what you're putting out there and how it resonates with the average person. So I think, yeah, having someone who has a mind for that is going to do well for you if you're a founder and you're feeling a bit like lost in the woods.
Yeah, I love it. Nic, thank you so, so much for coming on today. I loved this conversation. You're brave for wanting to talk about it. Even like even talking about like Hurricane Helene or anything like that, like I get little butterflies in my stomach. I'm like, oh my God, am I saying this right for everybody? And so I think it's great to work with people that have awareness or have some sensitivity themselves and can speak on your level. So when if anyone's listening that is thinking about hiring a publicist or a team, definitely get a vibe check. I think that's really important before you just
Yes.
hop into working with them. I don't know about you, but I've heard a lot of people getting burned. I mean, this is just our industry. It's like you either have an amazing experience. I feel like it's very polarizing. It's like
Ah,
amazing experience, or they're like, I had the worst experience ever.
yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. I feel like, especially, I've heard stories of brands going to like these bigger agencies and kind of getting lost in the shuffle, or you have the director bring you on, and then your account gets handed off to like an account coordinator that only has 1 or 2 years, and they're doing the best that they can, but maybe they haven't navigated some of these shifts. So I
Yeah.
think if you're pitching something that is going to need a little extra like heart or love or attention or feels more sensitive or nuanced, it can be good to go with more of a boutique agency or a freelancer or someone who's more of like an expert in that space and has navigated that before. Because, like we said, there can be real risks to getting it wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Nic, where can people find you? And also, like, what kind of brands are you looking to work with? I don't know if you have any space whatsoever, but I know who's listening. I know anyone who is listening is going to just fall in love with this conversation and you. So, yeah, give us all the tea.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you for letting me do a little plug.
Mhm.
So you can find me on socials. It's at It's Lunch Co. I also run a sexual wellness awards platform, and that is at the SXWA. So both of those are on Instagram. At the moment, I am pretty booked up, but I will have openings for new clients in June. So would love for anyone to reach out if they think I might be the right fit for them, and you can email me at nick@lunchconsulting.co.
I love that. And if you want to reach out to me to connect to you, I'm happy to do that. I love being a connector, aka PR.
Thanks, Lydia. I hope we get to work on a project together soon. I think that would be pretty fun.
That would be pretty fun if anyone's listening. Yeah, maybe we'll just like work together,
Yeah,
email us both and we'll chat about like a
we're
good
manifesting that.
we're manifesting this. Nic, thank you so much again. And everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of Visibility Era, the podcast.